Welcome to another episode of the GayBarchives show, where we explore gay history one bar at a time. I'm your host, Art Smith, and in today's episode, we'll be taking a stroll down memory lane in Los Angeles. Our special guest tonight is known as the funniest guy in Hollywood. He's an accomplished songwriter, actor, comedian, and the biggest thing out of Paterson, New Jersey, Bruce Vilanch. So I decided today I'm going to, instead of just directly asking you questions, I'm going to mention 10 fun facts about Bruce Vilanch, and then we can talk about each one of them afterwards.
That's a good idea. That'll be different. Maybe we'll get something that we didn't get before.
Maybe.
One never knows, do one?
Nope.
No,
so here we go.
All right.
Fun fact number one about Bruce Vilanch. He started his career as a model.
Well, yes. I did. I was a charming chub. I should explain. That was for Lane Bryant. Lane Bryant was a chain of stores for the forgotten woman, sort of like plus size Americans. Their plus size had not been invented yet. It was just like for fat broads. It's where fat women went to shop. And I guess there were not enough fat women because they decided to have a line for fat kids. So I was a kid and I was a model. It was called Charming Chubs. Then I became a stylish stout, which, as you can imagine, didn't last long. And then I graduated to Husky, which is still around. Husky is neither man nor boy. You're just Husky. You're a big kid. And I think that was out of their league. There was no way you could make these kids look good. So, and eventually, I mean, it disbanded because they were asking a lot of money for children's clothing. So, but it set me on a career to modeling, which hit a wall as soon as I got too big. I wasn't cute anymore. I was just kind of there. So that was the end of that. But I was a child actor at the same time. And I was doing a lot of that, but I also kind of outgrew that because I never looked like I could play kids' parts after that. I always looked like I was born 40. I looked like the floor walker in department stores, or that character, that Gail Gordon, Mrs. Carmichael, that kind of character, or Gladys Kravitz, the next door neighbor. I just wasn't. Child actor material, and that's why I kind of started writing, because I was competing with actors who were twice my age, and that they were getting cast, and I wasn't.
So, fun fact number two: Bruce Vilanch was gay before Stonewall.
Oh, well, yes. Bruce Vilanch was probably gay from birth, but we never go into it too deeply. Yeah, I mean, I came of age before Stonewall, and I was like bisexual, actually, which I think everybody is until they're about 25, and then they really commit. But there was no non-binary, there was no fluid. This was the Jurassic period of homosexuality in America. But I came of age, but I wasn't old enough to really be into the bar scene at that point. I was just getting there. And the bar scene, of course, was very treacherous back then, because you could be arrested just for touching somebody. Casually, reaching for a peanut. And there were vice cops all over, because they would send the cops out from the vice squad because it was an easy collar to pick up some gay guy for touching them in a bar. And then it went on their record, and there was a bail, and the state made money, and et cetera, et cetera. That's our criminal justice system. And of course, one of the things that gay liberation people began arguing at the beginning was an end to that kind of harassment. So anyway, yes, I was. Stonewall was the beginning. There were other places where it happened before Stonewall, but Stonewall, got the spotlight because it was New York, and because it was on the heels of Judy Garland's death, which the media conflated it with. So, but as a result, people all over the country saw what was happening, and they said, the revolution has begun. And so the like-minded gay people and their allies began structuring an activist network right from there.
Was Stonewall kind of a sigh of relief for you when that happened? Did you start to feel a little bit more comfortable about being gay and being out at that point?
No, because it was. We pretend it was a big deal. It was not a big deal in terms of society. It was a big deal in terms of our society. So it didn't change anything materially. It changed our mood. It changed the activism. There began to be an activist element that had been buried in sub rosa things like the Mattachine Society. But there were, you didn't feel any different when you were out and about on the town. But first of all, as I say, I was like bisexual. I always had girlfriends, and I always thought that was what I wanted to do. And at a certain point, I realized that if I really wanted to marry a woman and have children with her, she deserved better than a guy who was going to go skulking off to the Greyhound station to pick up a sailor. And that was, when they say gay is a choice, I made a choice to be my authentic self as opposed to masquerading as somebody else.
Right. And back at that time, I know I came out about probably 10 years or so after you did. And there wasn't really a whole lot of comprehension even for us as to what it meant to be gay. You had gay encounters, but you didn't understand the concept of a gay lifestyle and having a gay partner for a long time or having a, permanent relationship. It was difficult to come to terms with that.
Well, I think, I think that was absolutely, you're absolutely right. I mean, because you had a sexual drive and you exercised it, but that didn't mean you were looking to live that life. It meant you were looking to scratch that itch, and that you had other plans for your actual life. And at a certain point, you realized this was going to be a fundamental part of your life, and you might as well adjust your sights. And there was also, of course, no concept of coming out at that time. People didn't make declarations. It was all very quiet. I mean, coming out happened later, and I'm glad it did, because it was the only way that we got mass visibility. The idea of actually announcing to the world and having enough pride to announce to the world that you were gay and it was okay. That came later on. That was a separate piece of activism that got some traction.
Now, according to some sources,
yes, it sounds like the beginning of It's Raining Men.
You made Bette Midler famous.
No,
I've read articles that claim that it was largely your influence that kind of brought her to the forefront of the gay entertainment community, which then catapulted her into fame. Obviously, she has talent, but tell us about your experience with Bette, how you met.
I could never make that claim because she was well on her way. I mean, I didn't tell her to go play the Continental Baths. I mean, that was something that happened, and things began to grow from there. That was where she got her initial gay fan base. And then she began, off of that, she got other nightclub appearances and got a record deal. And the first record came out, The Divine Miss M, and the first hit was Do You Want to Dance? And it had appeal across the board. She became a star off of that. And then she started touring, and there was a thing in the gay community because she started in the baths, and because whenever you would see her on television, you felt like you knew her. You felt like she got you because she was campy, and she had the same sensibilities that were going around at that time. The nostalgia for and love of the old music and the old movies, and the kind of outre view of the world and view of yourself, that you're doing the best you can. and you were an outsider. You were not conventional. You weren't standard. She didn't look like Karen Carpenter. She didn't sing like Karen Carpenter. She was not one of those. She was not a Hollywood blonde. She was an unusual character. I mean, the closest thing was Barbra Streisand and Janis Joplin on the other side, and somewhere in the middle was Tina Turner. So she was, which all were influences on her. But I think that word began spreading, and when we first started touring, the crowd that showed up was predominantly gay because the word got out, and it just built and built. And as she got more exposure, of course, the crowd got bigger. But we used to joke, like when we would play Oklahoma City in a 3,000-seat arena, and she would say, "Well, I sure hope nobody in town needs a blowout because every hair burner in the world is here." So, it was like that.
Now, in addition to writing comedy pieces for Beth, you also were involved in a couple of her more famous numbers. You were involved with Clams on the Half Shell, Divine Madness.
I co-wrote that.
Divine Madness.
Yeah.
And the infamous Johnny Carson farewell song, You Made Me Watch You.
That's written by me and Mark Shaman and Bet. The three of us sat down and came up with that whole segment for the penultimate Johnny Carson show, where she was actually going to be the last guest, because Robin Williams was the lead guest, and then Bet came on, and it was the end. And it was the last time that anybody would see that show in that format. The next night he did a 90-minute monologue. So we sat down, and she had done, I think, 27 Tonight Show appearances with Johnny. And we wanted to try and recreate that kind of thing, where she came out with a big up-tempo number and then sat down and talked to him. And she would sometimes sing a little something while she was sitting there, and then she would close with a big ballad. And so that was how we built it, and it became iconic. I mean, it was. We did it on a Friday. It aired on a Thursday, actually, and on Monday, Jay Leno took over, and Billy Crystal came out and did a parody of it, which Mark was also involved in. And then and then later that year, The Simpsons did it. They had her serenading Krusty the Clown on his last show somewhere. I don't know, some circus in Springfield. But I have a still of her sitting on a piano, and Krusty is looking up or sitting on a desk, and Krusty's looking up at her, just like Johnny Carson. And she won an Emmy for that performance. 20 minutes. It's a category that doesn't exist anymore. It was Best Variety Performance. It was too weird, because they should bring it back, actually. But then now if you're on SNL or one of those shows, they put you into the acting category. So there you go.
So this may be the most unexpected of the fun facts about Bruce Vilanch. You hold a Guinness World Record.
Yeah, I do. Walking sideways. Now, I'm not sure. I haven't looked in a Guinness book lately, or even on a Guinness website. So I don't even know if it's still in there, because they keep changing. People keep making bizarre record claims, and the only way you get in by doing it and having evidence that it actually happened. And I was working for the Chicago Today, which was a newspaper of the Chicago Tribune that they folded into the Trib. And I did lots of stunt kind of stuff, and I decided I'd try and break into the Guinness Book. So I did a series about breaking into the Guinness Book, trying different things like donut eating and baking the world's largest pizza. I had several different categories, and the last one was walking sideways. They have, of course, a category for walking across America or Asia and walking backwards across America or Asia, but they didn't have a walking sideways. So we did that. And I walked from the Tribune Tower on Michigan Avenue in Chicago to the Water Tower, which is where the Chicago Fire started. It was put out, I should say. And those are two iconic landmarks in Chicago on the Magnificent Mile. And it was about a half a mile, I guess, or maybe a mile, I don't know. But I walked sideways. It was a fast track, and there was a chopper in the air from the Tribune's TV station, WGN. And of course, we had photographers on the ground. So there was ample evidence that I had actually done this. And they had to put it in the book. And for years it was in the book. But this is almost 50 years ago. A slight stint.
Do you still practice walking sideways just in case you have to defend that title at some point?
I do, but I don't realize I'm doing it.
It's usually after a cocktail or two.
One of those just audio tics, I guess, that just sort of all of a sudden there I am heading towards the toilet sideways.
So,
no.
Fun fact number 5: Bruce is older than the actual city of West Hollywood.
Oh God, yes. I was around everybody. Well, not everybody. There's some twinks who were younger, but I don't even know how old it is now. Is it 30 yet?
Yeah, it's 37 actually.
It's 37. Well, obviously I'm older than that. It was 37. I was around when it was started. I think I may have actually been living in the city of West Hollywood. What year was it?
1984.
Oh no, I had already bought. I was up in the hills in Nichols Canyon, but I had lived in West Hollywood for years before that. But I wasn't voting there anymore, so I didn't get to vote for it. I don't think. I don't really remember, but I was a very stalwart supporter of it. Yeah, because it was basically it wasn't the idea of a gay city. I mean, there are gay people, and we said, wouldn't that be great if there were like a gay city where we were in the majority? Well, we weren't in the majority. But it's only 30,000 people, and so we were close. But it was renters was what got the thing made. It was a city of angry renters, and so the first thing they wanted to do was put in rent control, and that happened. And while they were at it, they began, because the people who ran for a city council were basically a majority gay. I think of the 5 people, I think 3 of them were gay, and so it became kind of like. They branded it the creative city, which of course is code for, the cocksucking city, creative people. So, and it was meant to be to draw a revenue from the design industry and from entertainment industry. But I mean the bars and restaurants and clubs and theaters, not movie studios. There's no room for a movie studio in West Hollywood unless you go back to making silent or porno. Yeah, porno. And in fact, there is some. But yes, I am older than the city of West Hollywood, but that's a dubious honor. I mean, I know some people who are older than the city of New Amsterdam.
Well, the reason I mention that is because West Hollywood has a pretty rich history in the gay scene. Largely because long before it was ever an actual city, it was unincorporated Los Angeles County. And that's where a lot of the gay establishments kind of migrated to, because the enforcement of these types of discriminatory laws was lessened out there than it would be if you're actually in the city.
Yeah.
And I know
the city police were notoriously homophobic and anti-everything. And if you've seen LA Confidential, you would get that. Not much has changed. However, it was the county sheriff who had the jurisdiction in West Hollywood until it became a city, and then they made a deal with the county sheriff that he continued to have the jurisdiction because it's too expensive to actually maintain a police department. Beverly Hills next door has a police department, but they'd been around for a long time already. And obviously the Beverly Hills tax base is a lot higher than the West Hollywood tax base.
Probably so.
But that is exactly why. That is but that's another reason, but it wasn't the primary reason that it happened. But it was one of the reasons why it was carved out of the area between Beverly Hills and Los Angeles.
And I know from a previous conversation we've had that you have a little bit of a scoop on a bar there that was pretty well known called Numbers on Sunset Boulevard. Tell us a little bit about your days at Numbers.
Well, Numbers was a hooker bar, basically. Before the internet, when people actually had to go out on the street to meet people, there were 2 ways. I mean, there were people on the street. I mean, Selma Avenue and Sunset Boulevard. I mean, the Santa Monica Boulevard were 2 streets filled with guys standing on the corner pretending to hitchhike, and they were actually hookers. And Selma, which is a street below Hollywood Boulevard between Hollywood and Sunset, was so famous for that. Johnny Carson used to make a joke. Doc Severinsen, his band leader, who was straight, had very flamboyant Sergeant Pepper kind of outfits he wore every night. And so he would make veiled jokes about him being this big old queen, which he wasn't. And one of the jokes he made was, Doc was late coming to the show tonight. He was involved in a rear ender on Selma. It got a huge laugh from the audience, the local audience, right? The tourists had no idea what he was talking about, but there were enough local people in the crowd. It was a huge, anyway, it's because there were lots of these guys. And when they weren't on the street, they were in bars that decorated the whole neighborhood, but not, every bar had a different flavor. And Numbers was a particularly, the particular flavor of Numbers where older gentlemen met younger gentlemen. And the younger gentlemen were all for hire. So the place was, if you were old, you were a buyer, and if you were young, you were a seller. And it was on Sunset, next to what's now the Laugh Factory. And the street behind it, there was a hill, and so it was built into the side of the hill. And you parked behind it on the top, on the parking lot, and you entered the building there, and you had to take a stairway down to the club, which was on street level. And of course, they made perfect effect of that club, of that stairway. They put mirrors all around. It was called Numbers because the hookers were this number and that number, and it was all about phone numbers, and that's where that came from. But if you would come down the stairs as you entered, there were mirrors all around, and so everybody would just watch people entering, like Hello Dolly. They'd come down the stairs, and first you'd see the feet and the legs, then the package, then the body, then the face, and all that. And you could just and things would, if there was a spectacular number coming in, everybody would kind of be riveted. Also, now I think of it, the mirrors were angled, so when you were sitting in a booth, you could look up in the mirror and you could check out the package on the person who was sitting next to you, if you were into that sort of thing. So it was all artfully designed as a pickup bar, but partially that was because it was transactional. Everybody who was in there was there to make money. So it wasn't like, we're gonna arrange this so people can get to know each other. No, it was the currency of the day.
Now I understand they also had a really good dinner menu.
They did.
That the food was really good there, which is a plus.
And it was a great camouflage if you just wanted to go. Let's go to Numbers for dinner. The food's great. Okay. And then you would sit there and you'd watch what paraded by you. See, I wasn't that old, but I was not a seller. So I was deemed a buyer almost immediately.
One of my Facebook friends had remarked that the table service there was excellent, and the under table service was even better.
Not wrong, exactly. Not wrong at all. And there was no cover charge. There was no cover. There was a minimum. Never mind. We could go on forever.
Also in West Hollywood, one of the long-running infamous faces there was Rage. Did you ever have any experiences there? Was that? Yeah,
I emceed a drag show there. I would go in. It was a dance club, and I wasn't much into that unless I was really, really stoned. And they had, but they would have funny drag shows, and so I would go in. I knew a lot of drag queens, and so I would have occasion to go and watch them work. But that's what it was. It was a dance bar. It's too loud to talk, and you would just either watch the show or dance and carry on. And it was where people picked people. It was a gay bar. People picked people up. There were all kinds of. As your show is about all kinds of gay bars. There were gay bars where you actually sat at the bar and had a conversation with somebody. Rage was not one of those.
And they lasted a long time, but they closed last year.
It was a COVID closure.
They're gone now, but
it's coming back.
They are coming back. Lance Bass says he's opening up the biggest, greatest gay bar in the country right there. How do you feel about that?
Well, I know he has to because he is pregnant with twins, not himself personally.
Are you?
But
sure?
he and Michael are about right around Halloween. They're going to have a boy and a girl, twins. So he has to have a revenue stream. And Halloween, of course, will be a big night there. I'm sure he'll be open. He'll be open because he's a Halloween junkie. I'm sure he'll be open by then. I think it's fabulous. I mean, why shouldn't it come back? And it's great that there's like a gay celebrity who's working in the gay community, doing that. He already has a place called Rocco's, which is across the street from Rage, actually, and is a big success. It's kind of like a sports bar on steroids.
I'm looking forward to
that gives you some idea of how we've evolved as a community, that we can have sports bars. The only sports bar I ever saw was in Washington. It was called Nellie's in our nation's capital. And that would make sense because there were a lot of, closeted people in politics, and they could go to a sports bar, and it was an innocent place for them to be, while at the same time they were making contacts with other gay guys. And that's Washington, where everybody has short hair. And then you come out to LA, and there was a sports bar called Gym Bar that also got closed during COVID. But the idea that there could actually be these bars, that there are people. I mean, at Gym Bar, they would have like the West Hollywood swim team, and there's a West Hollywood soccer team and softball. I mean, there are all these gay guys who are into sports in a physical way, which is like a whole different thing. When I was growing up, that was not what you met when you were out there looking for gay guys.
I understand Gym Bar may be opening up also again in the
in a different location, yes.
Near Lance's new bar.
Down the street, right, about a few doors down in what used to be called the Halal Guys, who I guess, I don't know, they decided that there was not enough desire for Middle Eastern food or something. That it's a small space, and we're all wondering how Gym Bar will fit in there, and what there is about that space that we don't know, because the space they were in was tiny, but it wasn't quite. I don't think it was that tiny, but you never know. I mean, I may just be talking.
Well, we hope they all do well. We need some fresh gay blood in our lives, some fresh gay bars to keep us going. Fun fact number 6. Bruce Vilanch wrote "Where Is My Man" for Eartha Kitt.
It's true, and as Eartha used to say, you're still asking that question, aren't you? Yeah, I did. I wrote it. I did. I had written the first draft of an epic film called "Can't Stop the Music," and I wrote the first draft and quit because the producer Alan Carr was auditioning it for different leading ladies, and I kept rewriting it for free. And I said, "You got to pay me now for a second draft." And he said, "No, you can finish. Goodbye." So. But I met Jacques Morale. That was a Village People movie. Jacques Morale invented the Village People, and he also ran a nightclub in Paris called the Crazy Horse. And he didn't run it; he worked for them, but he wrote songs for their review. And the Crazy Horse was a topless nightclub, and the girls would come out and they would sing. They would lip sync to famous people singing original material, and Jacques would get this one, this thing, that, and that was it. And he got Eartha to do one, and he called me and said, Eartha is going to do a song for the Crazy Horse, and I think you should write the lyric. It's called "Where Is My Man?" And so he sent me the track, and I wrote a lyric to the track, and we all went to Paris, and Eartha recorded it. And it went into the show, and it was hysterical because it was about a 7-foot-tall blonde Amazon with gigantic boobs. How she managed to stand up without pitching forward, I'll never know. And she lip-synced the song, not as Eartha, just like singing, like lip-syncing, like she was singing like Eartha. And it was a huge hit, and Jacques got a record deal in France on his label there. And it went to number 1 in France, and all around the world. It was a big hit. Every place but the U.S., because they wouldn't play disco on radio at the time. And radio at the time was how you broke a record, AM radio. So I had what was called the 12-inch, which is the record that that DJs would play the song on at clubs. And for years, people would call me up from all over the place saying, "Listen, they're playing your song." They'd be on the dance floor somewhere, and they would run to a phone that was near there. There were no cell phones yet. And I would hear them all, saying, "I want a yacht, a man with a big, 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 big yacht," which is one of the jokes in the song. Anyway, we did an album with Eartha of disco songs, and that did very well. And then I did a Village People album with Jacques later on, with a song called "Sex Over the Phone," which was so hot it was banned by the BBC, which meant, of course, it went to #1. And it was great. That was sort of my career as a lyricist, pretty much. I'd like to have done more, but I don't know. I called my friends, and they all said, "Yeah, let's write something." And then we had a couple of false starts, but nothing really happened. I was very good at, classic lyric writers sit down and write the lyric, and then the composer comes in and write, or you do it in a room together. And I was adept at writing to a melody that somebody gave me. Tell me what you wanted, and give me a title, and we're off. I suppose if I were writing a musical, it would be whatever the situation was in the musical. But it didn't happen yet.
There's still time.
Hopeful.
Fun fact number 7. Bruce is the title character of a movie called Get Bruce, which is possibly the least known star-studded film in Hollywood history. Tell us about that.
Well, now there are so many now. Thank you, Netflix. I mean, there were a million little-known Hollywood films. But it was 20 years ago, and it was a documentary, sort of, produced by Harvey Weinstein, who never laid a hand on me. I'm duty-bound. # why not me? But he did a good job, and it was Miramax, his company at the time, which was acquired by Disney while we were doing it, and then so it became a Disney home video item, and that was where it really sold well, because it had a limited release. It was a documentary about what I do, about writing for people and for shows, and it had 4 big segments with Bette, Robin Williams, Billy, Crystal, and Whoopi, each being interviewed. And then they followed me around a couple of these big production shows that I did, and grabbed stars on the hoof, and they were interviewed. And it's really very funny. Robin's brilliant, and my mother is hilarious. They are the stars of the movie. And I look at it occasionally because people ask for one thing or another. And I recommend, if anyone says to you, "Look, I'd like to do a documentary about your life," I say, go right ahead, because you get to see yourself in many different weight levels and hairdos.
And T-shirts.
Good. And T-shirts, yes, the weight classes. T-shirts with jokes that mean nothing anymore, basically. There are some jokes in that show 20 years later still have a shelf life. I'm amazed, but there you go. One never knows, do one?
Fun fact number 8. Bruce Vilanch has 6 Emmy Awards.
Well, it's true. I mean, I say now multiple Emmy Awards because I have 2 at home here that actually have my name on them. They're for shows I wrote, 2 Oscar shows with Billy Crystal. And then there are 4 others for shows that I wrote that won Best Show in their category, and they gave me an Emmy because I was part of the team. So, and those I farmed out to other people because they like to have Emmys on their desk. My agent, my manager, and my accountant, he loves having an Emmy on his desk and all of that. So it adds up to 6, and I was nominated for a few others, but like 2 or 3 others, but I can say that cavalierly because I didn't win, and why bring it up?
Do you think they would get upset if you lined them all up together and painted them the rainbow colors? You could have one for each color on your mantle.
Would the awards themselves be upset?
No.
The Academy? I have no idea. I don't think the TV Academy is quite as prissy about the Emmys as the Movie Academy is about the Oscars. But, I mean, the Movie Academy says when you win it, they tell you, please don't sell this. If you wish to sell it back to us. We will buy it from you, and we'll give you a good price. But we don't want them in circulation. And the TV Academy doesn't do that, to my knowledge.
Yeah, I've heard stories about that before. John Best told me that the security they go under when they ship them out, and and for each year's recipients is incredible. They just don't want anybody getting their hands on it, getting a mold of it, making a duplicate. Now with 3D printing, you could.
I don't know why they would send it out. I mean, basically, at this point, I think in the old days they did, because you would surrender it when you left, and then they would engrave it and whatnot and send it back to you. But even so, you see lots of pictures of people with Oscars on the night. Now they set up a station at the governor's ball afterwards, where you can get the Emmy engraved. I don't even know. They may not do the governor's ball afterwards. Now they may do a thing backstage, but they you can get it engraved and all that, so you can take it home with you.
Fun fact number 9: Bruce did drag on Broadway.
Well, yes, I did Hairspray, which is bigger than drag.
Yes, it is.
She's a real woman. I did Hairspray on Broadway for a year. I did it on the road for a year before that. It was a highlight of my performing life. It was so much fun to do. I would do it again in a minute. And they're going out on tour again, but I think it's non-equity. I can't. But it's it was fabulous. But it's drag, but it's not. I don't know. It's hard to say, because she really is a real woman, and everybody refers to her as a real woman, and she's a real character, and it's always been a drag performance. And I've always said that drag is women in quotes, and so I guess Edna is sort of a woman in quotes, because she's a little bit more theatrical than your average Baltimore housewife.
Yeah,
but it's a fine line. We're parsing now.
Well, you followed in the footsteps of Divine, who, of course, was the original Edna Turnblad, and then Harvey Fierstein did it next, and then you followed in his footsteps, and then somehow John Travolta ended up following you.
Well, yes, other people followed me first, but he did the movie that they did of the musical of Hairspray. And he came to see the show, and I was in it. And he said he came back and shared his ideas. He said, "I think she has to have a waist, because she's huge. She's right. Like mountainous." And and I said, "No, I don't think so. He loves her, the husband, for who she is." But he went ahead in the movie, and I said, he had more makeup on him than the girl. I mean, he had so much makeup. He looked like Kirstie Alley. He had so much makeup. So I thought there's not that far to go for her to go up to the transformation that occurs in the course of the show. But, it's a $100 million movie. How do you argue with that? It worked. It was a huge hit. So,
and he was out of at least these 4, he was the only one that was not openly gay. You had Divine, you had Harvey Fierstein, and yourself, and then John Travolta, which everybody wants to talk about, but
a lot of other people have played. Michael McKean actually followed Harvey on Broadway before I got there. I was the first person to do it after Harvey, but it was the national tour. And Harvey left, and Michael McKean came in for 5 months, and I followed him. Michael McKean's straight. And there were other people who, Michael Ball in London, and the guy did the Canadian Company. A lot of straight guys have played the part, so it's not an exclusively gay thing.
Of course, at least for once, the gays had the lead. The gays started the role, and the straight people followed later.
I guess if you're doing, there probably is not the only show on Broadway where that's the case.
I'm sure it isn't.
but why go into it? Why try and figure it out?
Fun fact number 10. Bruce owns what may be one of the world's largest personal T-shirt collections of thousands of T-shirts.
Yeah, I do. It's not even a collection. I mean, a collection kind of implies that, you know where they are at any given moment. And I mean, I just got a warehouse full of this shit. I mean, I have about 1,000 of them here, and then I've got the Home for Aged T-shirts in Van Nuys in California in the Valley. And the assistant goes out and culls every now and again. She'll call me up with the phone and say, "You want this?" Because we give them away and all that. A lot of them, the ones I keep are jokes, and a lot of those, again, like in Get Bruce, a lot of them are jokes that have gone out of comprehension at this point. So it was never, I never was aiming to collect stuff, but it's just, it was just my look. That's what we used to call it. It's his look, and now it's my brand.
Well,
because we're very brand oriented these days.
And you wear them everywhere. You wear
brand for somebody.
You wear them everywhere. You've worn up to the Emmys, the Oscars, anywhere you go you might have a suit on, but it's almost always a T-shirt there.
Yeah, I did. For a while, I had. Oh my God, it got bright. For a while, I had a. Let me see if I can cure that. I had. I would wear a tux jacket. But then I kind of abandoned that too because nobody was expecting it anymore at any of these things. And I had a tuxedo T-shirts, which are kind of it's a cheesy old joke. But I also there's a whole line of fake body T-shirts where it's just your neck and it's a gorgeous girl's body or a bikini body. Or Bob Mackie made me one that was like Anne Margaret. It was a gorgeous beaded gown with real rhinestones and jugs coming up out of it. It was pretty fabulous. So I wore those, and then now when I do it, I just find something that has it's black that has a funny line on it. And that seems to be, I can get away with it. The important thing is, you have to wear the credential of these things. And the credential is on a lanyard and it dangles down, and that it spoils the joke. What would kill the joke? Kill Gladys Kravitz to have this thing saying "admit him everywhere" on it. So I have to be skillful. I have to,
or
strategic dressing.
Or you have to invent a new harness like they use for the police guns over the shoulder.
Over the shoulder.
Yeah, where you can put your credentials off to the side. I tried
that, but it gets moved. I'd have to invent something new. I used to loop it into my belt, and it would dangle between my legs. And when people if they had to check it, they would have to go down and look. But then the head of security said, "Very funny, but you have to wear it around your neck." So that was what I did. Sometimes it's like if I have to, I can pin it up there or something like that, so it looks like a badge, or like where they're going, "The eagle has landed," that kind of
thing. So, bonus fact: Bruce supports many charities, mostly focused on either the gay or Jewish communities, or a combination of the two. Tell us about some of your favorite charities that you've supported over the years.
The American Bulimia Society. With your host, really, Kate Moss. Say something. Give us a finger. Well, I grew up Jewish, and when you grow up Jewish, you learn that a lot of people hate you, and a lot of people aren't going to help you, and you have to help yourself. And I always thought that was a great mantra for the gay community. And as a result, there are a lot of Jewish charities, and when AIDS started, so I was involved with them. And when AIDS started, a lot of volunteer organizations sprang up because so many people were afraid of it, and they were staffed by volunteers, obviously, who weren't getting paid. And there was no money, and the government wasn't forthcoming. So a bunch of us decided that what we should do is start doing what show people do and throw a show, do a benefit, and raise money that way. So, but it was difficult to get people to do a benefit for this disease. So I would trade off. I said, well, if you do my benefit, I'll do your benefit. And so I became acquainted with all the big diseases: cerebral palsy, polio, spina bifida, myasthenia gravis, anxiety or disorder. I'm your man. I know all about this stuff because I've written for all of these things. Big brothers, little sisters, I've written them all. And as a result, and those people would come and work on the AIDS shows that we were doing. And at the beginning, some performers who had been affected directly by it, like Bet, Madonna, Joan Rivers, Nell Carter, whose brother died of AIDS, and they came aboard immediately. And then when Rock Hudson got sick and Elizabeth Taylor got involved, that was when the whole thing went really mainstream, because not only did the disease go mainstream and that the world knew about it now, and everybody on the planet knew somebody who actually had it and died from it. And the people who were at the top of the pyramid, like Elizabeth, were known by everybody. And I used to joke with her, because we do a lot of charity events. I would say, anybody will take your call. Even the Pope will take your call, if only to discuss jewelry. Because the Pope does have a lot of jewelry, and so did Elizabeth. And we laughed, and on we went. So it was that was how I got involved with all that stuff, and it remains to this day. I was on the board of the LA Gay and Lesbian Center for 22 years, and it's now grown to such a degree that it's become like almost a corporate thing, and that, of course, always kind of scares me away, because I don't want to be involved in corporate politics. But I felt like 22 years I had helped lay some kind of a groundwork. Anyway, so I'm still involved in those things. Yeah, it's a good thing.
And we're glad to have you there. So I was reading something that was posted by a Playboy publicist who claims that you were in Wisconsin around 1980 and witnessed Hugh Hefner's most impressive erection.
Is that a reference to the building?
Yes, apparently.
Wisconsin?
Apparently.
Because I actually never did see Hugh. I'm sure Hugh saw me naked. But I would trick with people at the Playboy Mansion, visiting rock stars, and he was watching on television. He had cameras set up all over the place. This was not a secret. So I kept saying, the Hef is watching us. But at the time, it was a little pre-tech, like the idea that somebody would have tapes, and there was no selfies and sharing and all of that stuff. So it was a more innocent era, and that all, of course, changed. But I was at the Playboy Club. It wasn't that late. I don't know, 1980. I don't even know if they were still there. When I was in Chicago from 70 to 75, we would fly up every few weeks to Lake Geneva in a private plane, the Bunny Jet, to see Anne Margaret or George Carlin or whoever was opening at the club. The Lake Geneva Playboy Club was a hotel with a golf course, and it was no gambling, but it was a big vacation and conference center. It was a great way for corporations to get their executive staffs, most all of whom were men at the time, to go to a conference. You say, "Oh, we're going to Playboy Club," and ooh, they love that. So, and there were bunnies and all of that, and it was gorgeous. That area of the Wisconsin Dells is just spectacular. So again, Hef was there, and Hef would fly up with us, and there would be a big opening night thing, and then I would write about it for the Chicago Tribune. It was like, conflict of interest? What conflict of interest?
I think Rob Lowe is the one that brought the secret sex videos to the forefront, that it could actually happen.
Well, that's
and that was several. That was a decade later.
That was 89. Yeah. Well, 88 is when it happened at the Democratic Convention in Atlanta.
Yeah, I was there, and I used to go to the Club Rio that was associated with that whole event. Some friends of mine in Atlanta owned it, and yeah, it was a crazy time. So, out of all the gay bars from the past, which one would you most like to go back and revisit?
Well, there was a bar in Chicago called The Trip that I really liked. And it was because it was very much of its era. This was 1970. And it was a holdover from the 60s and the 50s before that. It was, I don't know that I would get, I was dressing, I hadn't come to T-shirts yet, but it wasn't what you call a dress bar. There was a bar in Chicago called Kitty Sheehan, which was a dress bar. You had to be in a suit and tie to go in. And Kitty Sheehan was a drag queen who looked exactly like the mayor, Richard Daley, in drag. And we never did see them together. but that was a high end place, and this was like it was. You didn't have to get dressed up to go, but it had a real sophisticated vibe. People sat and drank martinis and spoke of the opera and cried over Judy Garland's death, which was fairly recent. And there would be female impersonators, there'd be performers, but mostly they were drag queens. But the big star there was a guy named Arthur Blake, who was kind of legendary in the world of impersonation. He didn't work in drag, and he would do every woman in the business, but and a lot of the men. And he would just have a comb, and he would change his hair and he had very long stringy hair, so he could do very funny things with it. And he has a couple of records that are probably still around. He was a great favorite out here. He played a club somewhere on the strip, like Trocadero or the Magambo or the Crescendo, probably the Crescendo. And everybody went to see him. Betty Davis loved him. She said on television many times that he was her favorite, doing an impression of him and of her. And he really did a hysterical impression of her. But so he would be at the Trip a lot. He actually lived in Chicago in the summer and in Fort Lauderdale in the winter. So he was one of the first of those queens. There are a lot of them now. There was that kind of, there were that, and they all passed through. Charles Pierce, Lynn Carter, Craig Russell. Jim Bailey was more mainstream. He played the Empire Room of the Palmer House. But they all came through, and I wound up writing for all of them. So there you go.
So that was a pretty good experience for you, being in Chicago and being in the center of the Midwest.
The Trip would be the place, yeah.
Very cool. Now you've lived through a lot of this history of the gay bar scene that I've been documenting for the past couple of years, because really it didn't get fully underway until probably the 60s to begin with. In the 40s and 50s, the gay bar scene was a very underground kind of.
Very underground. Yeah.
In the 60s is when it kind of started coming of age a little bit. And then, of course, after Stonewall and into the 80s is when you really started seeing a resurgence of, gay bars on every corner in some cities.
Yeah.
But a lot of younger people now have no idea of those experiences. They don't understand what it was like when you were coming out, or even when I was coming out, to not know that there were safe havens and places you can go. What do you think that the young people today could learn from exploring a little bit more about, the history of the gay world?
Well, I think anybody should read history just because we're not the first people to do a lot of the things we think we are the first people to do. And so it's an education, literally, to go back and read about all of that stuff. I think probably it's if it needs to have a reason other than that, it's because you understand what the struggle was like, what it was like before. We had it easy. I mean, they compared to what we went through, they have it very easy. Not that what we went through was all that dark and devilish, except if for some people it was, but we didn't have the sort of casual acceptance that goes on now, except on the very highest levels, and the casual acceptance was so casual that it was never even spoken of. But now it's like, everybody's like, okay, fine, it's that kind of thing, I mean, even in ordinary conversation, you find more and more people are not surprised when somebody says, and this is my husband, and there isn't that moment where they go, your husband,
Right.
They kind of, oh, well, yeah, right. They can marry, and that's right. Why wouldn't they, etc. And I mean, sometimes you see the dime drop, but a lot of times you don't. A lot of times it's like, yeah, right, I get it. And there was a time when that was not the case. So it's good for younger people, I think, to know about that. But it's so hard these days because we live in the most narcissistic era ever. I mean, the internet is narcissism central. And everybody gets to publish their first draft, unfiltered, uncensored, but unedited. And so and outrage is the new national disease. Everybody is outraged about something, and everybody's very sensitive. And sometimes they're covering it up in a woke sensibility, so so that legitimizes it, and which is appropriate at sometimes, and sometimes it's no, they're just legitimizing their own crabbiness. But it's so it's hard to say to them, there was a time, or it's hard to say to them that there's anything that happened before this era, which is all about them.
Well
but
said.
I won't get myself laid by saying this. Fortunately, big ticket movies are coming back, and I can go take some guy to see Godzilla versus Kong and guarantee myself a good night.
Right then.
Work.
Whoa. Well, it's been really great talking to you about, your history in the gay world and your professional history in general. A lot of people, I don't think, realized how diverse your talents are.
Wow, thank you.
And it's really nice to see that you've been out there in the gay world for 50 years plus and made it through quite fine, successful financially, professionally, personally, and you're still here telling us about those stories. So that's really great. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about?
God, no. What could there be?
I don't know. Social security number, phone number.
Have you gone through every gay bar in every city in America in your reminiscences?
I have not. It's a very difficult thing to do. So far, I have documented about 1,300 defunct gay bars from across the U.S. And at the time when I was reaching 1,000, I thought, wow, that's quite a few. I didn't realize there were that many. And then,
that's amazing, isn't it?
Well, then I got a little slap in the face. A couple of guys that I've been communicating with in Chicago who are specifically focused on recording the gay bar history of Chicago sent me a list that they've compiled that includes 700 gay bars from Chicago alone over the years, probably dating back to the 30s or 40s. Now, so I know of another 600 or so that I haven't documented yet, but when I document them, I want to know not only the name, but I want to have a description of the bar, the street address, the years of operation. Some of the ones they've documented, they've only said, well, Bruce told us this bar existed on, Halston Street, and it was there from 1982 or 83. That doesn't give me enough to work with. I want to know, I want to be able to say it was here. This is what kind of bar it was. And so keeping that in mind, though, that tells me there's probably thousands more bars that I haven't found yet.
There probably are. And also, when somebody says it's a gay bar, what does that mean?
Right.
I mean, my favorite place in Chicago was a club called Punchinello's, which may be on their list, which would not qualify as a gay bar. It was full of gay people, but it was a show bar. It was where people from the theater went afterwards. And it was pretty gay, but it wasn't gay. It wasn't on anybody's list, I don't think. There used to be guides, the Damron guide, which would tell you where gay hotels, cruising spots, all that kind of stuff. Spartacus, that was the one you used when you went overseas. And I'm sure if they're around, they're probably just websites now. But and you never know when people tell you, oh yeah, there was, and also like this is 82, 83. If it was there for a hot minute and then it went away. But
right, and we've all seen those. I've seen bars that have closed basically before they opened.
Yeah, right.
They had enough money to stock the bar once and have an opening party, and that's as long as they lasted.
See what happens.
And that concludes another segment of the GayBarchives podcast. You can find more podcasts at gaybarchives.com/podcast. We also have more information about this podcast and links to the other podcasts we have completed. We hope you enjoy your trip down memory lane.